Hello there and welcome back to the Asian Athletic. Another international break has just come and gone. There were some really interesting fixtures and some very important historic results. What I've gone ahead and done for today's video is picked a few of these games out, and I'm going to give you my thoughts about each and every single one of them. Starting off with Singapore, who defeated Hong Kong 2-1 to progress to the Asian Cup for the first time since 1984, which they only qualified for because they hosted it. Before the game, Singapore played a friendly against Thailand, which they lost 3-2. Now, on paper, that may have sowed some discontent or fear amongst Singaporean fans, but what I think actually happened was filled them with a lot of confidence. Singapore actually went toe-to-toe against Thailand throughout the whole game. Kweh, a player who I talked about in my last video, went ahead and actually scored Singapore's 2 goals. I would say Singapore were actually unlucky to walk away with a loss. Thailand's first goal was brilliant. A bouncing volley that crashed off the underside of the crossbar. Mahmoud was completely unsighted. You can't do anything to stop a shot like that. Singapore then responded with a fantastic goal. A well-worked deep cross that was squared across the face of goal and tapped in tidily by Kweh. Overall, Singapore played really well against Thailand. So even though they lost the game, they showed plenty of promise, and I'm sure many Singaporean fans weren't actually that worried about their loss. On the other hand, Hong Kong hosted a friendly against Cambodia, drawing 1-1. Unlike what I said about Singapore's game against Thailand, the result of this game was worrying. Cambodia is a team that has not been playing a lot of football recently. Their last international win was against Timor-Leste at the ASEAN Championship last year. On the other hand, Hong Kong were pushing for a spot at the Asian Cup. The contrast is pretty big. Hong Kong had won their previous 3 matches against Cambodia. Cambodia hadn't kept a clean sheet in 8 games. But the result? A flat, disappointing 1-1 draw. Disaster for Hong Kong. This was supposed to be their preparatory game, but they just got it all wrong. To me, they looked shaky and unprepared for their game against Singapore. Fast forward to Tuesday, however, and what played out was actually one of the best games of football I've seen in a while. In front of an intense atmosphere of over 47,000 fans, Hong Kong and Singapore played an end-to-end game of football. Hong Kong definitely seemed to have the better chances earlier on. The Matt Orr goal, for example, really showed that. Straight after that goal, actually, there was a massive chance which Hong Kong missed. Juninho was unable to score from point-blank range with his header ballooning over the bar. Right after that, though, Singapore missed a huge chance too. The ball was cut back across the face of goal to a totally unmarked attacker who couldn't score. Going into half-time, you start to wonder if this is finally Hong Kong's time to go to the Asian Cup. And they continued their momentum straight away in the second half, with Junior's effort being cleared off the line by Baharudin. Hong Kong then had another chance that they probably should have scored again, with Junior's cutback scrambling through the arms of the goalkeeper before being cleared again by Baharudin. Ashley Westwood could not believe that they didn't score, and I don't blame him. Now, I'm not sure what happened, but the momentum seemed to suddenly swing in Singapore's favour. Maybe it was a mix of complacency, exhaustion, overconfidence, I don't know. But Hong Kong's defence started to split open. Singapore were able to find the space to launch their fast-moving counterattacks, and the pressure was mounting on Hong Kong's defence. The defending became more and more desperate before eventually Singapore scored after an insanely well-worked team goal capped by a cartoonishly perfect dink from Shawal Anwar. Ilhan Fandi then found himself with a bit of time on the edge of the box and smashed it into the net. Just between you and me, I reckon Zhenpeng Wang should have saved that. It was going straight at him, and for me, he should have done better. And then, that was the game. Singapore won. It was a really great game, but utter heartbreak for Hong Kong, who have had such a good qualifying campaign. However, I'm glad that it climaxed with such an entertaining game of football. I think Matt Orr summed up the game really well for Singapore, though. He stated in a post-match interview, "It was a game of 2 halves. First half, we played really well. We started really well. We had all the chances. In the second half, we needed to bring more energy, be more focused and more concentrated. Look, fair play to Singapore. They played very well in the second half. It's a dream growing up in Hong Kong to represent Hong Kong and to captain them in front of 50,000 people. It's a young boy's dream. So massive credit to all the fans. We're going to take this loss and we're going to go back and improve. Keep dreaming and keep fighting. We're going to be back. Don't worry." I don't think he could have put it any better than how he did, because Honestly, if I'm being 100%, I do really believe that one day Hong Kong will be back. Next, I want to look at Bangladesh and their 2 games that they played. Hamza Choudhury scored again for Bangladesh, this time scoring twice in their 2-2 draw with Nepal. In their next game, arguably the most important one, Bangladesh beat India 1-0. Their first win over India in 22 years. 19-year-old Shekh Morsalin scored the winning goal, and he looks to be a promising player for Bangladesh. He can play across a number of positions. He can be a winger on either side, a number 10, a striker. He can even drop really deep as an out-and-out midfielder. My only issue is that I'm not exactly sure what his best position is. He's mostly been playing as a number 10 or a centre mid for his club, but then for Bangladesh he's appearing mostly as a right winger. Granted, there are some players who are incredibly versatile and can do that, but because he's quite young, I do just wonder where he is going to fit into the setup going into the future. That being said though, he looks really good, and I'm sure many Bangladeshi fans are really excited about him because I do think he looks like the sort of player you could build a team around. Another player who has formed the axis for Bangladesh is Hamza Choudhury, who put in a great performance in both the Nepal game and the India game. Bangladesh have looked pretty exciting recently. Bangladeshi Diaspora are now willing to play for Bangladesh, something that I think we are seeing across many Asian countries, and I think it's really great. Zayyan, Ahmed and Shamit Shome are 2 really great examples. They still have a while to go before they can make a huge difference. The gap between Choudhury and the other 2 is massive, of course. Choudhury being a player who used to play in the Premier League and he still plays for Leicester City, so it's not really a fair comparison to compare Choudhury to Ahmed and Shome. But anyway, back to the point. Bangladesh, great international break for them. Next, I want to talk about South Korea and Japan. South Korea and Japan both played Bolivia and Ghana each, and whilst they both beat their opponents, you can seriously see the skill gap between these 2 countries, especially after South Korea's 1-0 win against Ghana, in which South Korea didn't particularly play the best. There has been this looming problem over South Korea for a while now. What actually is the best starting lineup? And how do you fit all of your best players into the team without putting them in the wrong positions? Which leads to the next issue, which is what formation to play. Unlike Japan, South Korea's squad depth isn't the greatest. I mean, it's not terrible, but you can't really compare them. And I think the main issues come in the attack. Against Bolivia, Hong Myung-bo played a front 3 with Hwang Hee-chan on the left, Lee Kang-in on the right, and Son through the middle. Then Lee Jae-sung played as a number 10. It worked. Mostly. I say mostly because Lee Kang-in just didn't look fully comfortable on the right, and Lee Jae-sung, one of South Korea's best players and an incredibly underrated player in my opinion, just did not have a good game as a number 10. But then the dilemma is that if you play Lee Kang-in as the number 10, which is his best position, who do you play on the right wing? You could play Yang Min-hyuk, but he is not as experienced as the others. Simultaneously, you would feel bad for leaving a player like Cho Gae-sung on the bench, because when he is at full fitness, he is South Korea's best number 9. So do you play a front 3 of Son on the left wing, Cho in the middle, and Lee Kang-in on the right? Or do you play Hwang on the left, Cho in the middle, Son on the right, and Lee Kang-in as the number 10? But then where would you play Lee Jae-sung? Would you play him alongside Kastrop or a more defensively minded midfielder? There's not long before the next World Cup, and South Korea still haven't figured out their best 11. They haven't even figured out where Son's going to play on the front line. They haven't even figured out which goalkeeper they want to use. The only position which looks fully nailed on looks to be Kim Min-jae at centre-back and Sol Young-woo at right-back. The performance against Ghana was especially worrying though. At least under Paulo Bento, South Korea looked like they had a clear game plan. You could tell which players he favoured the most, which ones he relied on. It was compact, it was defensive, it was pragmatic football. But under Hong, I'm not too sure. Meanwhile, Japan look so ready for the World Cup. They figured out how to get all their players in their best positions without it feeling unnatural at all. There is no Japanese equivalent of Paul Scholes playing on the left wing, if you understand what I mean. They play with 2 attacking midfielders, Kubo, the more balanced playmaker, and Minamino, the more attacking-minded goal-scoring one. Ueda plays through the centre, providing good hold-up play and pace. Then you have your back 5 with Ritsu Doan squeezed in at the right wing-back position where, in reality, he actually isn't one. He's just really being a right winger. Because Kubo can drop deeper as a more traditional midfielder, Sano can go out wide to cover Doan's defensive duties. Doan can focus exclusively on using his explosive pace to begin counterattacks and lock onto Kubo's through balls, link up with Ueda, and provide genuinely frightening chances. Now, Ritzer Doan is good, but I don't think he's actually that good. But honestly, when he plays for Japan in this setup, he looks ridiculous. And the crazy thing is, I can say that about every single player in this team. Hajime Moriyasu deserves every award possible because the way this man gets the most out of his players is outrageous. I think Japan have 2 starting 11s that could make it to a World Cup quarter-final. In each position, excluding probably right back and centre back, Japan has at least 2 more players who can play equally as well as whoever is starting. Not even that, the bench players can bring on something slightly different too. They are ridiculously good and the squad depth is incredible. I would genuinely say that this has the potential to be possibly the best Asian squad of all time, at least on paper. The gap between Japan and the rest of Asia could not be bigger. And by the way, I am not Japanese. I'm not glazing them because I'm Japanese. I genuinely think that they are the dark horses for the next World Cup. What these matches demonstrated was the gap between South Korea and Japan. Both teams are growing and they are getting better. But whilst Japan has figured out their preferred starting 11, accommodating for their best players while still playing a system that is exciting to watch and gets results, Korea cannot figure out where to play any of their best players, whether they can play any of their best players, and how to get the most out of these best players. The gap is massive, and I wonder if that is because of the managers in charge of both teams. I'll let you guys decide that in the comments. Okay, next, the one that we've all been waiting for. Okay, I said Hong Kong versus Singapore was a great game of football. I think this possibly might have been better. Now, the first leg was pretty good from both sides. The UAE were probably the better team overall in my opinion, but Graham Arnold did a pretty good job at getting the most out of Al Hamadi, who is a player that I think has been struggling recently at club level. He's not quite become the player people hoped he would have become. Zidane Iqbal didn't look particularly great when he came on as a late substitute as well. You wouldn't be mistaken to believe that the UAE would have the advantage going into the next leg. The momentum looked very much in their favour, and when the lineups came out for the second game, you got Caio Cesar starting up front for the UAE, you just sort of look at that and think, the UAE, they're going to win here. They saved Caio Cesar, they saved his fitness for the second game by not starting him in the first leg, they substituted Luanzinho early in the first leg, they're going to start him in this game, he's going to be fully fit. Meanwhile, Iraq were without Al Hamadi because he picked up a calf injury. Not only that, but just in general, look at the Iraq squad. Most of the players that Iraqi fans are excited about are fairly young and inexperienced when it comes to these high pressure environment games. This includes the aforementioned Al Hamadi, but also some of the key players like Ali Jassim, Aymar Sher, Marco Farji, Zidane Iqbal. These are key players for Iraq, and as much as I think they're fantastic, the odds just looked overwhelmingly against them, at least from my perspective. The game, however, played a lot differently to the pre-match predictions. Both Iraq and the UAE matched each other evenly. The press was intense straight from kickoff, with both teams looking to put as much pressure on the opposition defence as possible, with the UAE preferring to go out wide with Jimenez acting as a central pivot to spray passes to the overlapping fullbacks. 5 minutes into the second half, the UAE score after a quick break. This was then immediately followed by a thunderous effort from Maloney. Around this point, I really thought that the dream was over and Iraq would slowly peter off. However, they scored from a great set piece and suddenly it's game on. Now, Graham Arnold made a few key substitutions for Iraq that really threw off the UAE defence. Firstly, he took off Sher for Iqbal, a defensive midfielder that likes to dictate play more so from the back. Then he took off Sherko Gubari, someone who is normally a winger, for Mohanad Ali, an out-and-out striker. With Sher off the pitch and Iqbal sitting deeper, the Iraqi forwards would have to drop considerably deeper in order to move possession forwards. So Hussein and Ali would essentially both be playing as second strikers or attacking midfielders rather than strikers. The UAE did not react to these changes, instead opting to stick to their narrow defensive formation with the fullbacks tucked in, as if they were still facing against the 4-4-2 formation that they were facing earlier. As a result, there were numerous moments where Zuhair or Amaral were caught out of position after Faji or Mohamed Ali had quietly ghosted in behind them. Essentially, the UAE fullbacks were playing more like wider sitting centre-backs, leaving lots of space behind them and beside them. So whenever Iraq did find an opportunity to attack, you could see the UAE defensive line almost freeze as they suddenly needed to track back. As time went on, it slowly became quite chaotic, as you would see Emirati defenders crisscrossing in front of each other to try and close the gaps, even though they get in each other's ways. And the UAE, full credit to them, the players did a very, very good job at containing Iraq, who, by the last 20 minutes, were very much hitting their stride. And I'm not going to lie, if it wasn't for that seriously unlucky handball right at the end, the result could have been very different. There is an alternate timeline very close to this one where the UAE takes the game to extra time and they win. A very close game, a very good game, and a very historical and memorable night for Asian football. Well done to both the UAE and Iraq for getting to this stage, especially after playing their 4th round games in Qatar and Saudi Arabia. It's not to be this time for the UAE, but in the future, you never know. As for Iraq, they will now head to the Interconfederation playoffs in Mexico, where they will face either Bolivia or Suriname. If Iraq win that game, then they will head to their first World Cup since 1986. Now, how the Iraqi fans and players will get to the USA, that's a whole nother story. Let's just focus on the football for now. Here are some other notable results that you may have missed from this international break. Malaysia scraped by Nepal in a nervy 1-0 away victory. Turkmenistan beat Taiwan 3-1, with Taiwan now going 7 games without a victory. Their last was against Mongolia last year. Vietnam continued their steady form with a 2-0 win against Laos. A Rafaelson penalty and late goal from Tuan Hai Pham just about saw them through. Meanwhile, New Zealand put up a good performance against Colombia in their 2-1 away defeat. A late Carbonero goal won the game for Colombia, while Saint Etienne's Benjamin Auld got on the score sheet, scoring his 2nd goal for New Zealand. Elsewhere, 51st ranked Qatar fell 2-1 to 129th ranked Zimbabwe. Despite having 69% of the possession, Qatar failed to make any good chances and ultimately fell in a humiliating defeat. Finally, Australia were defeated 3-0 by Colombia. After a stalemate of the game, the Socceroos ultimately collapsed in the final minutes, conceding a penalty followed by goals from Luis Diaz and Jefferson Lerma. And that's it. That was the international break. Lots of great games and plenty to think about before we head into the next break and eventually the World Cup. Just like to say thank you so much. We just hit 800 subscribers. Thank you so much for the support. Please keep commenting your thoughts and opinions down below. I want to keep growing this community and I love reading and replying to your comments. Finally, make sure you check our community posts. There you can drop more video suggestions and also play around with some of the polls that I post there. I'm going to keep it short though. As always, thanks for watching and I'll see you later.